December 3rd, 2024, Carmel by the Sea, California. Vincent Torino was locking up his theater when the most famous face in Hollywood stepped out of the shadows. 15 years. That's how long it had been since the casting room incident. The humiliation, the cover-up, the silence that made both their careers and destroyed their souls. "Hello, Vinny." The voice was older now, weathered by fame and secrets. "We need to talk." What happened in the next 2 hours would bring down 3 studio heads, expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of Hollywood, and prove that some debts can only be paid in truth. The security cameras captured everything. The FBI would study the footage for months, but they never understood the real story, the story of 2 men who spent 15 years preparing for this moment. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Vincent's hand froze on the theater's brass door handle, his keys dangling like wind chimes in the December air. The Pacific fog rolled between them, thick as stage smoke, but nothing could obscure those eyes. Dark, calculating, older than their years. The same eyes that had stared him down across a mahogany desk in a Century City high-rise, while 3 studio executives decided who would take the fall. "You look surprised, Vinny." The actor stepped closer, designer boots silent on the wet cobblestones. "Didn't you get my message?" "What message?" Vincent's voice came out smaller than intended. Nothing like the booming theater director's projection he'd cultivated for 15 years. His mouth tasted like copper pennies and old fear. "The roses, 3 dozen black roses delivered to your box office this morning." A smile played at the corners of the actor's mouth. Not the charming grin that graced movie posters worldwide, but something sharper. "No card, but you knew." Vincent's stomach dropped. He'd thrown the roses away immediately, told his assistant they were a prank. But somewhere deep in his gut he'd known. You don't survive Hollywood for 30 years without developing instincts about when the past comes collecting. "That was you." "It wasn't a question. That was me." The actor pulled a silver cigarette case from his jacket. "Real silver," Vincent noted. "Probably worth more than the theater's monthly rent." "Mind if I smoke?" "Old habits. This is California. Everything causes cancer." "Some things are worth the risk." The flame from an expensive lighter illuminated sharp cheekbones, highlighting 15 years of aging that makeup artists and personal trainers couldn't quite erase. "Besides, we both know there are worse ways to die than lung cancer." The threat hung in the salt air between them. Vincent glanced toward the street, hoping to see late-evening tourists or local residents walking their dogs. Nothing. Downtown Carmel rolled up its sidewalks after 9 p.m., leaving only the sound of distant waves and the electric hum of vintage streetlights. "What do you want?" Vincent asked. "Same thing I wanted 15 years ago. Justice." The actor took a long drag, smoke disappearing into the fog. "The difference is now I have the resources to get it." Vincent's mind raced through possibilities, exit strategies, explanations. 15 years of small-town theater had made him soft, complacent. He'd forgotten the razor's edge that Hollywood balanced on, where careers lived and died on whispered conversations and leveraged secrets. "If you think I'm going to apologize for—" "I don't want your apology, Vinny." The actor's voice cut through the fog like a blade. "I want the truth, all of it. Names, dates, recordings, bank transfers, everything you've been hiding in that storage unit in Seaside." Blood drained from Vincent's face. The storage unit was registered under a false name, paid for in cash, known only to him. He'd been so careful, so methodical about covering his tracks when he fled Los Angeles. How could— Surprised, the actor flicked ash onto the cobblestones. "You always underestimated people, Vinny. It's what made you such a perfect fall guy back then. Arrogant enough to believe your own lies, but not smart enough to cover them properly." A black SUV materialized from the fog, sliding silently to the curb like a shark emerging from deep water. Tinted windows reflected the streetlights, revealing nothing of who waited inside. "Get in the car, Vinny." "I'm not going anywhere with you." "Yes, you are." The actor dropped the cigarette, crushing it under his heel. "Because if you don't, tomorrow morning every major news outlet in the country receives copies of the Blackwater Studios files. Audio recordings of you begging Marcus Hendricks to let you frame me for the accounting scandal. Video footage of you accepting briefcases full of cash. Bank records showing $2 million deposited into offshore accounts under your wife's maiden name. Vincent's knees nearly buckled. Sarah had been dead for 3 years cancer, the real kind, and she'd never known about the money. He'd kept it separate, untouched, telling himself it was insurance rather than blood money. Sarah had everything to do with it. The actor's voice turned cold as Pacific fog. Her medical bills were mounting. Experimental treatments in Switzerland don't come cheap. When Hendricks offered you that exit package, you didn't think twice about throwing me to the wolves. The SUV's passenger door opened with a soft electronic hiss. Vincent could see a figure in the driver's seat, face obscured by shadows and window tinting. 2 hours, Vinny, that's all I need. 2 hours of complete honesty, and maybe we can find a way through this that doesn't end with you in federal prison. Vincent looked at his theater, really looked at it. Hand-painted marquee advertising next week's production of Our Town. Box office windows reflecting his terrified face. 15 years of building something clean, something honest, something that didn't reek of corruption and compromise. All of it about to disappear. Clock's ticking, the actor said, gesturing toward the open car door. Vincent walked toward his reckoning. Drive, the actor said to the figure in front. Vincent caught a glimpse of the driver in the rearview mirror, a woman, mid-40s, with steel-gray hair pulled back severely. Her eyes met his for a fraction of a second, and he saw something there that made his stomach clench. Recognition. This wasn't some hired muscle or anonymous chauffeur. This was someone who knew exactly who he was and what he'd done. As they pulled away from the theater, Vincent pressed his face to the window, watching his life's work disappear into the fog. 15 years ago, when he'd first driven into Carmel with nothing but a duffel bag and $2 million in blood money, he'd never imagined he could build something worth losing. The Carmel Community Theater had been a desperate purchase, a failing venue that no one else wanted, in a town small enough that his Hollywood reputation hadn't followed him. But somehow, impossibly, it had become home. He thought of Emma Rodriguez, his assistant director, who would arrive tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. sharp with her usual thermos of coffee and boundless enthusiasm for whatever production they were mounting. Emma, who'd never asked why a man with Vincent's obvious experience had ended up in their tiny theater, who'd simply accepted his expertise and his demons with equal grace. She'd be wondering where he was, why the lights were off, why his car was still in the parking lot, but the theater was locked up tight. Vincent's throat constricted. Emma had been Sarah's oncology nurse during those final months in Monterey. When Sarah died, Emma had been the one to sit with him in the hospital hallway, holding his hand while he sobbed like a broken child. She'd been the one to suggest he needed something to keep his hands busy, his mind occupied. The theater had been her idea, actually. A way to honor Sarah's love of community arts, she'd said. Emma didn't know about the money, didn't know how those experimental treatments in Switzerland had really been paid for. She believed the same story Vincent had told everyone, that Sarah's life insurance and his Hollywood savings had covered the costs. The lie had become so natural that sometimes Vincent almost believed it himself. "Tell me about the girl," the actor said, his voice cutting through Vincent's memories. "What girl?" "Don't." The word carried enough venom to stop Vincent's breath. "Emma Rodriguez, age 47, former RN, lives alone in a cottage on Scenic Road. No family, no husband, just a theater that means everything to her and a boss who's built her entire world on a foundation of lies." Vincent's hands clenched into fists. "Leave her out of this." "She's already in it, Vinny. Has been since the day you hired her." The actor leaned back, studying Vincent's profile in the passing streetlights. "What do you think happens to your precious theater when the FBI seizes your assets, when every dollar you've invested gets traced back to Blackwater Studios? Emma loses everything. The actors in your little production of Our Town lose everything. The community that's come to depend on your arts programs, all of it gone." The SUV turned onto Highway 1, heading south toward Monterey. Through the windshield, Vincent could see fog rolling off the Pacific like smoke from some massive invisible fire. Sarah used to love driving this stretch of coast, especially on nights like this when the world felt wrapped in cotton and mystery. She'd roll down the windows despite the cold, breathing in the salt air and talking about how the fog made everything feel possible, like they were driving through the edge of dreams. "She would have hated what you did," the actor continued, reading Vincent's thoughts with unsettling accuracy. "Sarah, all those years you were married to her. Did she know what kind of man she'd married? Did she know about the bribes, the cover-ups, the way you'd sell out anyone to save your own skin?" "Sarah was good," Vincent whispered. "Better than I deserved." "Yes, she was. I met her once, at the Blackwater Christmas party in 2007. She talked about wanting to start a community theater someday, maybe when you both retired. Said the industry was too cutthroat, too willing to sacrifice people for profit. Vincent's chest tightened. He remembered that party. Sarah in her blue dress, radiant even as the cancer was beginning its silent work inside her. She'd been so hopeful that night, so full of dreams about their future together. She never got her theater, Vincent said. No, the actor agreed. But you got yours, built on her grave, funded by her suffering. The words hit like physical blows. Vincent closed his eyes, but he could still feel the actor's gaze, patient and implacable as the tide. Vincent's lids fluttered open to find the SUV pulling into a roadside turnout overlooking the Pacific. Below them, waves crashed against jagged rocks, invisible in the darkness but audible as a constant threatening rumble. The driver killed the engine, and suddenly the only sounds were the ocean and Vincent's ragged breathing. The actor reached into his jacket and withdrew a manila envelope, thick with documents. In the dome light's pale glow, Vincent could see his own handwriting on several pages, his signature on others. His blood turned to ice water. Recognize these? The actor's fingers traced the envelope's edge like a blade. Your insurance policy, the one you thought you'd hidden so well. That's impossible, Vincent's voice cracked. Those documents are in Seaside Self-Storage, Unit 247, registered under Thomas Kellerman, your college roommate's name. Very sentimental of you. The actor smiled that sharp, predatory smile again. Did you really think 15 years was long enough for people to forget, to stop looking? Vincent's mouth went dry. Thomas Kellerman had died in a car accident in 1987. Vincent had kept his social security number, used it for exactly this kind of thing when he needed to disappear transactions from his real identity. It should have been foolproof. How did you find the storage unit, find out about Emma, about your cozy little life playing community theater director? The actor opened the envelope, withdrawing a photograph that made Vincent's stomach lurch. It was Sarah. Sarah in her hospital bed during those final weeks, skeletal and frail, but still beautiful in the way that dying people sometimes achieve when they've made peace with the inevitable. Vincent had taken this picture himself, wanted something to remember her grace in those last days. But this wasn't his photograph. The angle was wrong, the lighting different. Someone else had been in that room. You were there, Vincent whispered, at the hospital. I was everywhere, Vinny. I've been watching you for 15 years, every production you've directed, every speech you've given about the integrity of community arts, every time you've stood in front of those trusting people and played the role of the reformed Hollywood refugee who found his soul in small-town theater. The actor placed the photograph on Vincent's lap. Sarah's eyes, clouded with morphine but still holding that spark of intelligence that had first attracted him 32 years ago, seemed to stare directly at him, accusing. She asked me to visit, the actor continued, his voice softer now, more dangerous in its intimacy. Did you know that? 3 days before she died, she called my publicist, said she had something she needed to tell me, something about her husband and what really happened at Blackwater Studios. Vincent's world tilted. Sarah didn't know. She never knew about any of it. Didn't she? The actor withdrew another document, a bank statement from a Swiss account, Sarah's maiden name printed across the top. $2 million, Vinny. Deposited in 3 installments between September and November of 2009, the exact same months she was receiving those experimental treatments in Geneva. I never told her where the money came from. I swear to God, Sarah was a lot smarter than you gave her credit for. She spent 30 years married to a Hollywood casting director. She knew how the game was played, knew that $2 million doesn't just materialize from legitimate sources. The actor's voice turned gentle, almost paternal. She did some digging of her own, found out about the Blackwater scandal, about my destroyed career, about your convenient exit package. Vincent stared at the photograph, Sarah's face blurring as tears filled his eyes. She never said anything. Of course she didn't. She was dying, and confronting you wouldn't bring back the years you'd stolen from me. But she wanted to make it right. That's why she called me. That's why she left specific instructions in her will about what should happen to the theater if anything ever happened to you. The actor produced a final document, Sarah's will, notarized and legal, with passages highlighted in yellow. Vincent's vision tunneled as he read his own wife's words, written in her careful script during those final lucid days. If Vincent Torino is ever found to have engaged in criminal activities related to his departure from Blackwater Studios, The Carmel Community Theater and all associated assets should be transferred immediately to the actors' benevolent fund for the support of performers whose careers have been unjustly damaged by industry corruption. She knew, Vincent breathed. She knew everything. She knew you were a coward who destroyed an innocent man to save himself. She knew the theater she'd dreamed about was built on blood money. And she knew that someday, someone would come to collect what you owe. The fog pressed against the SUV's windows like grasping fingers. Vincent could no longer tell where the ocean ended and the sky began. Everything was gray, formless, drowning. His old life was already gone. It had been gone since the moment those black roses arrived at his theater that morning. Maybe it had been gone since the moment he'd signed those papers in Marcus Hendricks's office 15 years ago. Maybe it had been gone since the moment he'd looked into these same dark eyes and chosen his own survival over justice. This is bullshit, Vincent said, his voice gaining strength from desperation. You can't fake legal documents and expect me to call your lawyer. The actor gestured toward Vincent's phone. Robert Castellanos, right? Handled Sarah's estate? I'm sure he'd be happy to confirm the authenticity of his own work. Vincent's hand moved toward his phone, then stopped. Calling Bobby would mean admitting this was real, that Sarah had known about the blood money all along. He couldn't face that truth, not yet. Even if this is real, Vincent said, forcing steel into his voice, you've got nothing. Hearsay and circumstantial evidence. No prosecutor would touch a 15-year-old case based on recordings. The driver spoke for the first time, her voice crisp with authority. Full audio documentation of every meeting between you and Marcus Hendricks, every bribe, every falsified document, every detail of how you framed an innocent man to cover up the real accounting scandal. Vincent turned to stare at the woman's reflection in the rearview mirror. That voice, he knew that voice. His blood turned to Arctic slush. Hello, Vincent, she said, meeting his eyes in the glass. It's been a long time. Diana Walsh, former FBI financial crimes investigator, the one person at Blackwater Studios who'd refused Hendricks' bribes, who'd kept pushing for the truth even when the Bureau ordered her to back down. She'd been forced into early retirement when the case was buried, her reputation destroyed by whisper campaigns about mental instability and vendetta-driven investigations. She was supposed to be dead. Vincent had heard she'd committed suicide in 2012, unable to cope with the destruction of her career. You're supposed to be dead? Yes, that was the idea. Much easier to gather evidence when your targets think you're no longer a threat. Diana's smile was visible in the mirror, cold and patient. Amazing how careless people become when they think they've won. Vincent's chest constricted. If Diana was alive, if she'd been investigating all these years, then the recordings weren't bluffs, they were real. Every private meeting with Hendricks, every panicked phone call where Vincent had begged for reassurance that the frame job would hold, all of it captured, documented, preserved. I need to get out of this car. Vincent reached for the door handle, but the lock engaged with an electronic click. This is kidnapping, false imprisonment. This is a conversation, the actor said calmly, one that's 15 years overdue. I can make this right, Vincent said, his voice cracking with desperation. Whatever you want money, a public apology, I'll donate the theater to charity. Just tell me what you need. The actor studied him with those dark, unreadable eyes. You still don't understand, do you? This was never about revenge. It was never about making you suffer. Then what? Marcus Hendricks is still alive, Vinny. Still rich, still powerful, still destroying careers to protect his empire. And in 3 days, he's going to be in Monterey for the Blackwater Studios Legacy Gala, a celebration of 30 years of ethical leadership in entertainment. Vincent felt the last of his strength drain away. Hendricks. The name alone was enough to transport him back to that corner office overlooking Sunset Boulevard, to the moment when everything had gone wrong and Vincent had chosen the coward's path. What does that have to do with me? You're going to help us bring him down, Diana said from the driver's seat. All of them. Hendricks, the board members who covered it up, the executives who've been running the same scams for decades. We have enough evidence to bury them, but we need someone on the inside, someone they trust. They don't trust me. I've been gone for 15 years. But you'll be there, the actor said, at the gala, as my guest. Vincent's mouth fell open. That's insane. I can't. You can and you will. Because if you don't, everything we've shown you tonight goes public tomorrow morning. Your theater disappears, Emma loses everything, and you spend the rest of your life in federal prison while Hendricks continues destroying innocent people. The SUV fell silent except for the distant crash of waves. Vincent closed his eyes, seeing Emma's trusting face, the actors who depended on the theater for their creative outlet, the community that had embraced him despite his mysterious past. All of it built on lies, all of it about to crumble. "What makes you think I won't just run?" he whispered. "Because," the actor said, his voice gentle with understanding, "you're tired of running. You're tired of being afraid. And deep down you know Sarah was right. It's time to make things right." Vincent opened his eyes to find fog swirling around the SUV like ghosts demanding justice. "There's something else," Diana said from the driver's seat, her voice cutting through his paralysis. "Something you need to understand about that night, about what really happened in Hendricks' office." Vincent's stomach clenched. "I know what happened. I was there. You know what Hendricks told you. You know what he wanted you to believe." Diana shifted in her seat, studying Vincent in the rearview mirror. "But you never knew about Rebecca, did you?" The name hit Vincent like ice water. Rebecca Marsh, Hendricks' personal assistant. The pretty blonde who'd always been in the background during meetings, taking notes, scheduling appointments, invisible in the way that only truly dangerous people could be. "Rebecca was recording everything," the actor said quietly. "Every meeting, every conversation, every criminal conspiracy that passed through that office. Not for Hendricks, for us. She was my source inside Blackwater." Vincent's world tilted again. "That's impossible. She worked for Hendricks for years. She was loyal to her brother," Diana interrupted. "Tommy Marsh. Remember him? Young actor, just starting out, full of dreams and talent, until Hendricks decided Tommy knew too much about the accounting irregularities. Until Tommy had an accident on a studio backlot that left him paralyzed from the waist down." The fog pressed closer to the windows, and Vincent felt like he was suffocating. Tommy Marsh. Jesus Christ, he remembered now. The kid had been asking questions, getting too close to the truth about the missing production funds. And then, "The lighting rig," Vincent whispered. "They said it was equipment failure." "It was murder," the actor said flatly, "and Rebecca spent 3 years gathering evidence to prove it. She had recordings, documents, everything we needed to bring down the entire conspiracy. Until you walked into Hendricks' office that night." Vincent's hands began to shake. "I didn't know. How could I have known? You could have asked questions. You could have thought about anyone other than yourself." The actor's voice remained level, but something deadly flickered in his eyes. "Instead, you panicked. Chose the easy way out. Let them pin everything on me. I thought you were part of it. The evidence was fabricated. Based on Rebecca's real documents, but altered to frame me instead of Hendricks." Diana turned around in her seat, fixing Vincent with a stare that could cut glass. "She tried to warn you. Do you remember? She tried to tell you there was another way." Vincent's memory lurched backward, dragging him into that leather-scented office where his life had changed forever. Hendricks behind his massive desk, laying out the evidence, explaining how the theft could be pinned on a greedy young actor. And Rebecca in the corner, pale and trembling, her hands clutching a manila folder. "Mr. Torino," she'd whispered. "There's something you should know. Something about the real Rebecca," Hendricks had snapped. "I think Mr. Torino has heard enough details for one evening." Vincent had been too terrified, too focused on saving his own career to pay attention to the desperate plea in her voice. He'd signed the papers, accepted the blood money, and walked out into the Los Angeles night thinking he'd escaped the wreckage of his life. "What happened to her?" Vincent asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Car accident," the actor said. 3 days after you signed those papers, brake failure on Mulholland Drive. Very convenient." The fog seemed to seep through the SUV's sealed windows, filling Vincent's lungs with ice. Another death, another life destroyed because of his cowardice. "Her brother Tommy died 6 months later," Diana continued relentlessly. "Complications from his injuries," the doctors said. "But really, he died from despair, died knowing that his sister had sacrificed everything to get justice for him, and it still wasn't enough." Vincent doubled over, bile rising in his throat. 2 people dead. An entire conspiracy buried, all because he'd been too weak to do the right thing. "I didn't know," he gasped. "I swear to God I didn't know." "But you suspected," the actor said, "didn't you? In those quiet moments over the years when the guilt would eat at you in the dark, you knew something wasn't right about how neatly it all worked out." Vincent nodded miserably. He had suspected, Late at night, lying beside Sarah as she fought her losing battle with cancer, he'd wondered how Hendricks had managed to contain such a massive scandal so completely. How a simple accounting fraud had vanished without a trace, leaving only one scapegoat to take the fall. "The gala," Vincent whispered. "What exactly do you want me to do?" "What you should have done 15 years ago," Diana said. "Tell the truth." The fog swirled thicker around them, and Vincent realized they were no longer parked by the ocean. Somehow, while he'd been drowning in his memories, they'd driven deeper into the night, deeper into a trap that had been 15 years in the making. "Where are we?" he asked, his voice smaller than he intended. "Somewhere private," Diana said. "Somewhere we can finish this conversation without interruption." The actor reached into his jacket and withdrew another photograph. This one made Vincent's heart stop completely. It was Emma. Emma standing in front of the theater just hours ago, her face bright with excitement as she gestured toward the marquee advertising their upcoming production. But she wasn't alone. A figure stood in the shadows behind her, tall, silver-haired, wearing an expensive overcoat that Vincent recognized with sick certainty. "Marcus Hendricks was in Carmel today," the actor said quietly. "Did you really think your little theater was beneath his notice?" Vincent's hands flew to his phone, but Diana's voice cut through his panic. "She's safe, for now. You son of a bitch, we're not the ones you need to worry about." The actor's voice carried a weariness that hadn't been there before. "Hendricks knows we're getting close. He knows about the evidence, about Diana's investigation, and he knows the one person who could identify him as the real architect of the Blackwater scandal is sitting in this car right now." Vincent stared at the photograph, his mind reeling. He wouldn't hurt Emma. She has nothing to do with this. "Neither did Rebecca Marsh," Diana said. "Neither did Tommy. Hendricks doesn't leave loose ends, Vincent. He never has." The actor leaned forward, and for the first time since entering the theater, his mask of controlled vengeance slipped. Vincent saw exhaustion in those dark eyes, and something that looked almost like grief. "You want to know the real reason I'm here? The real reason I've spent 15 years planning this?" Vincent nodded, afraid to speak. "Rebecca was pregnant when she died." The words hit the SUV's interior like a physical blow. 3 months along, she was going to quit Blackwater, disappear somewhere safe with her evidence and her unborn child, but she wanted to save one last person before she ran. Vincent's throat constricted. "You, me, she'd seen what the frame job was doing to my career, my sanity. She called me the night before the accident, said she had proof of my innocence, proof that would bring down everyone responsible." The actor's voice cracked almost imperceptibly. "I told her to forget about me, said I could handle the destroyed reputation, that she should save herself." The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Vincent understood now why the fog felt so suffocating, why every breath seemed to carry the weight of the dead. "I could have saved her," the actor continued, "if I'd been less proud, less angry, less consumed with my own pain, if I'd listened to what she was really saying. You couldn't have known. I knew Hendricks was dangerous. I knew he'd killed before." The actor's eyes fixed on Vincent with laser intensity. "Just like you knew. Deep down, in that place where we keep the truths we don't want to face, you knew exactly what kind of man you were protecting." Vincent felt something fundamental shift inside his chest, like a bone breaking cleanly after years of aching. All the justifications he'd built, all the ways he'd convinced himself he'd been a victim to, they crumbled in the face of that simple, devastating truth. He had known, not consciously, not in any way he could articulate, but somewhere in his gut he'd understood that Marcus Hendricks was capable of anything, and he'd chosen to look away. "The gala isn't just about justice," Diana said, her voice gentle now, almost motherly. "It's about preventing the next Rebecca Marsh, the next Tommy, the next innocent person who gets too close to the truth." Vincent looked again at the photograph of Emma, saw her trust and enthusiasm, the way she believed in the theater they'd built together. Built on blood money and buried secrets, but still somehow pure in her hands. "What makes you think Hendricks will even talk to me?" Vincent asked. "I'm nobody to him now, a ghost from an old scandal." "Because," the actor said, pulling out his phone, "you're going to call him tonight. You're going to tell him that someone's been asking questions about the Blackwater case, that you're scared and need his help." Vincent stared at the phone. "He'll never believe. He'll believe it because it's true. Someone has been asking questions. Us." The actor's smile was sharp as a blade. And by the time he realizes what's really happening, it'll be too late. The fog pressed closer, and Vincent realized with crystal clarity that his old life wasn't just ending, it had been over for 15 years, since the moment he'd chosen cowardice over courage in a leather-scented office overlooking Sunset Boulevard. The only question now was whether he'd find the strength to choose differently. "I can't," the words came out as barely a whisper. "My hands are shaking too badly to dial." "Then I'll dial for you." Diana's voice from the driver's seat was implacable. "But Vincent, understand this. Once you make that call, there's no going back. Hendricks will know you're alive, know where you are. If you change your mind after that, if you try to run or warn him, Emma won't be the only one who pays the price." The actor leaned closer, and Vincent caught the faint scent of expensive cologne mixed with something else, exhaustion perhaps, or the particular weariness that came from carrying grief for too long. "Tell me about Sarah," the actor said suddenly. "In her last days, what did she say to you about forgiveness?" "That the only way to honor the dead was to live in a way that would make them proud." "And are you living in a way that would make her proud?" The question hit harder than any threat or revelation. Vincent saw Sarah in their bedroom at the hospice facility, her once vibrant auburn hair gone white and thin, her artist's hands reduced to brittle bird bones. She'd known about his past, not the details, never the details, but the shape of his shame. "Whatever you did before you came here," she'd whispered that last night, "it doesn't have to define who you are now. But running from it isn't the same as healing from it." "She knew I was hiding from something," Vincent said. "She never pushed, never demanded answers. But she knew." "And now?" Diana asked. "What would she tell you to do now?" Vincent closed his eyes and felt tears leak from the corners. Sarah would tell him to call Hendricks. She would tell him that Emma's safety mattered more than his fear, that Rebecca Marsh's unborn child deserved justice even 15 years too late. She would remind him that courage wasn't the absence of terror. It was choosing to do the right thing while terror clawed at your insides. "Give me the phone," Vincent said. The actor placed the device in Vincent's trembling hands. Diana recited Hendricks' private number, a number she shouldn't have known, a number that confirmed just how deeply they'd penetrated the man's carefully guarded world. Vincent's finger hovered over the screen. "What exactly do I say?" "The truth," the actor replied. "That you're scared, that someone's been asking questions about Blackwater, that you need his help because you don't know what else to do. He'll want to meet in person." "Yes, and you'll agree. The gala reception tomorrow night at the Monterey Plaza Hotel. Tell him you'll be there as my guest, that it's the perfect cover for a private conversation." Vincent's mind raced ahead, seeing the trap's elegant simplicity. Hendricks would come because he couldn't resist the chance to silence the last witness to his crimes. The actor would be there because he was expected, celebrated, above suspicion. And Vincent would be the bait that brought them together in a room full of cameras, journalists, and recording devices. What happens when he realizes it's a setup? Diana's reflection met his eyes in the rearview mirror. Marcus Hendricks has spent 30 years believing that money and fear can solve any problem, that people like you will always choose self-preservation over justice, that the system is designed to protect men like him. And if he's right, Vincent's voice was raw with exhaustion, if I freeze up again, if I can't go through with it? The actor was quiet for a long moment, studying Vincent's face in the phone's pale glow. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a gentleness that somehow made his words more terrifying than any threat. "Then Rebecca died for nothing. Tommy died for nothing. And tomorrow night Marcus Hendricks walks free while Emma becomes the next name on his list of necessary casualties." Vincent looked down at the phone, its screen now showing Hendricks' number in stark white digits. His thumb moved toward the call button, then stopped. "Promise me," he whispered. "Promise me Emma stays safe no matter what happens." "Make the call, Vincent," Diana said, "and Emma goes home to her family tomorrow night. Fail us, and she disappears into the same fog that swallowed Rebecca." Vincent pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice. "Vincent Torino." Hendricks's voice was exactly as he remembered it, smooth, cultured, with an undertone of casual menace. "This is a surprise." "Hello, Marcus," the words scraped out like broken glass. I need to talk to you." A pause. Vincent could practically hear the predator's smile spreading across Hendricks' face 300 miles away in Los Angeles. "After all these years? How fascinating. And what urgent matter brings the esteemed theater owner of Carmel by the Sea to my attention?" The mockery in his voice was surgical, precise. Vincent's free hand clenched into a fist, nails digging crescents into his palm. Across from him, the actor watched with the stillness of a hunting cat, dark eyes reflecting the phone's glow. "Someone's been asking questions." Vincent forced his voice to crack, let the genuine terror bleed through. "About Blackwater, about what happened that night." The silence stretched for heartbeats. When Hendricks spoke again, the amusement had vanished. "What kind of questions, Vincent?" "A private investigator. Woman named Diana Chen. She came to the theater 3 days ago, said she was looking into the original accounting fraud. She had documents, old Blackwater production files, financial records I thought were destroyed." Vincent met Diana's eyes in the rearview mirror. She nodded almost imperceptibly, confirming he was following their script. "And what did you tell this investigator?" Hendricks' voice had dropped to a whisper, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. "Nothing. I told her nothing, Marcus, I swear, but she knew things. About Rebecca Marsh, about the money. She kept asking why a simple theft required such an elaborate cover-up, why an entire production company had to die to frame one actor." The actor leaned forward, his face a mask of controlled fury and something else, hope, perhaps, or the terrible anticipation of justice finally within reach. "Where is this investigator now?" Hendricks asked. "I don't know. She left her card, said she'd be back with more questions. Marcus, I can't go through this again. I can't." Vincent let his voice break completely, the desperation pouring out like blood from an open vein. "What if she finds out about the money you gave me? What if she connects me to Rebecca's death?" "Vincent," Hendricks's voice carried the hypnotic calm of a snake charmer, "you're panicking over nothing. Some investigators chase cold cases for years without finding anything substantial. This will blow over." "She had photographs," Vincent pressed. "Pictures of Rebecca meeting with someone the night before she died. The faces weren't clear, but she said she was having them enhanced." The lie landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of implication across the connection between them. Vincent heard Hendricks' breathing change, becoming shallow and rapid. "We need to meet," Hendricks said finally. "Tonight." "I can't. There's a charity gala tomorrow night at the Monterey Plaza Hotel, the Coastal Arts Foundation. I'll be there as a guest speaker about community theater." Vincent paused, letting the next words fall like dominoes. "He'll be there too. The actor. It would be perfect cover for a private conversation." "Perfect cover." Hendricks repeated the words as if tasting poison. "Yes, I suppose it would be poetic, wouldn't it? The three principal players, in our little drama, reunited after all these years." Vincent's blood turned to ice. Hendricks was enjoying this. The bastard actually relished the prospect of facing down the two men whose lives he'd destroyed, confident in his power to silence them permanently. "Will you come?" Vincent asked. "Oh, Vincent, I wouldn't miss it for the world. But understand this, if you're playing some elaborate game, if this is anything other than exactly what you claim, the consequences will be severe. Not just for you." The threat hung in the fog-shrouded air like a blade. Vincent thought of Emma, of her bright laugh and unwavering faith in their small theater's ability to create beauty in an ugly world. Of Sarah, who died believing he could still become the man she'd fallen in love with. Of Rebecca Marsh and her unborn child, two more ghosts demanding justice from beyond the grave. "I understand," Vincent whispered. "Tomorrow night, 10 o'clock, the reception hall. I'll find a quiet corner where we can talk." "Yes," Hendricks said, and Vincent heard the smile return to his voice. "We'll talk. We'll discuss this investigator, and her photographs, and we'll make sure our old secrets stay buried where they belong." And tomorrow night, Marcus Hendricks finally pays for what he did. 3 months later, Vincent stood in the same spot where Sarah had once painted sunrise over the Pacific, watching fog roll across Carmel Bay like the retreating ghosts of his former life. The theater behind him buzzed with opening night energy. Emma, directing a crew of volunteers as they prepared for their production of The Tempest. "We are such stuff as dreams are made on," she called out during rehearsal, "and our little life is rounded with a sleep." The irony wasn't lost on him. Vincent had spent 15 years asleep, dreaming he could build something pure on a foundation of buried secrets. Now, in the aftermath of Marcus Hendricks's very public arrest at the Monterey Plaza Hotel, he was finally awake. The gala had unfolded exactly as Diana and the actor had orchestrated. Hendricks arrived confident and predatory, expecting to silence Vincent with the same casual brutality he'd used on Rebecca Marsh. Instead, he'd walked into a carefully constructed web of recording devices, FBI surveillance, and a room full of Hollywood elite, who watched in horror as 15 years of buried evidence spilled across the reception hall floor. Vincent had done his part, wearing the wire Diana provided, drawing Hendricks into admitting details about Rebecca's accident, about the systematic destruction of evidence, about the money trail that led back to offshore accounts and buried NDAs. When Hendricks finally realized the trap, lunging for Vincent with the desperate fury of a cornered animal, the cameras captured everything. The actor, whose real name Vincent learned was Michael Torres, had watched from across the room with tears streaming down his face as justice finally, impossibly, found its mark. Now Hendricks awaited trial in federal custody. The Blackwater scandal had exploded across every major news outlet. Vindication arriving for Michael 15 years too late to save his young career, but just in time to restore his reputation. Diana had returned to San Francisco with a Pulitzer-worthy story and enough evidence to reopen a dozen cold cases. And Vincent remained in Carmel, strangely unchanged yet fundamentally different, like a man who'd survived his own death. "You look thoughtful," Emma said, emerging from the theater with paint-stained hands and bright eyes. "Opening night nerves?" "Something like that." Vincent studied her face, the same trusting enthusiasm, unmarked by the knowledge of how close she'd come to becoming another of Hendricks' casualties. Diana had kept her word. Emma never learned about the photograph, about the shadow that had briefly fallen across her life. "The reviews are already coming in," Emma continued, scrolling through her phone. "The Carmel Gazette calls our Tempest a small miracle of community theater, proof that art can flourish anywhere when nurtured by genuine passion rather than Hollywood glamour." Vincent smiled, tasting salt air and redemption in equal measure. Sarah would have loved that review. She would have loved tonight. Emma's voice gentled. "You know she'd be proud of you, right? Of everything you've built here?" The words should have brought comfort, but Vincent felt only the familiar weight of incomplete truth. Emma didn't know about the blood money that had initially funded their renovations, about the federal investigation that had quietly seized and redistributed Hendricks's assets to various arts organizations. She didn't know that their small miracle was built partially on restitution, but perhaps that was its own form of Justice Hendricks' dirty money finally creating something beautiful instead of destroying it. "I need to tell you something," Vincent said suddenly, the words escaping before he could stop them. Emma looked up from her phone, alarmed by his tone. "What's wrong?" Vincent opened his mouth, then closed it. How could he explain that his entire identity in Carmel was constructed around a lie, that the man she'd worked beside for years was actually a coward who'd once helped bury the truth about a young woman's murder? "I'm proud of what we've built," he said finally. "But I want you to know that if anything ever comes out about my past, about things I did before I came here, you don't owe me anything. Your loyalty belongs to the theater, to the community, not to me." Emma stared at him for a long moment, then reached out and touched his shoulder. "Vincent, whatever you're carrying, whatever guilt you think defines you, it doesn't change the last 5 years. It doesn't change the dozens of kids who found their voice on our stage, or the families who found beauty in our productions, or the community that found a home in our theater." She squeezed his shoulder gently. "Besides, we all have things in our past we'd rather leave buried. The question isn't whether you were perfect before you came here. The question is who you choose to be now." Vincent felt tears gathering in his eyes, salt matching salt in the ocean air. Emma's words echoed Sarah's final wisdom, that redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but about choosing to honor the dead through how you lived afterward. Inside the theater, the actors were taking their places for opening night. Soon the curtain would rise on Shakespeare's tale of tempests and forgiveness, of powerful men brought low and innocence restored. The audience would settle into seats purchased with money that had once been meant to silence truth, watching art emerge from the ashes of old corruption. Vincent took one last look at the ocean where Sarah used to paint sunrises, where Rebecca Marsh had died 15 years ago, where countless stories ended and began with the rhythm of eternal tides. Then he turned back toward the theater, toward Emma's trusting smile, toward the sound of voices raised in rehearsed passion. He had a story to help tell, not about revenge or justice or the settling of old debts, but about the small miracles that could grow in the spaces between one ending and another beginning. The fog was lifting, and opening night waited,